First came across this information, I nearly fell out of my seat. The internet was up in arms today about a bombshell leak by Pepe Escobar, who claims to have gotten this information from an Asian source, and it pertains to what really happened on the night when Israel claimed to target an Iranian nuclear facility. Now, Pepe Escobar, if you don't know who he is, he's a prominent independent media journalist, not quite on the level of Seymour Hersh, but he runs in that circle, okay? And he wouldn't say anything if there wasn't some truth to it. In fact, he wouldn't say anything if it wasn't true. The fact that he's saying something like this, which is so outlandish on its face, you know, if there's even a kernel of truth to it, this is big, because this means we are far closer to the brink of Armageddon than anybody realizes. Now, again, Escobar, he can be a little ostentatious. He is an independent journalist, but I would say for the most part, he's credible, he's reputable. So for him to say something like this, he's putting his reputation on the line. Now, I'm going to read what he had to say. First off, we should address that the United States today, as the spearhead of the Western hegemons, has now officially confirmed and committed to a perpetual state of war between China, Russia, and Iran. An aid bill in Orwellian speak is going to allocate billions of dollars, which is going to likely necessitate billions more because of something called mission creep. We've now locked ourselves into 3 wars, and not only that, on the same day, passing a bill that will effectively ban TikTok if ByteDance doesn't divest, which is a Chinese company, and also seizing Russian assets to give them to Ukraine. Any one of those things would have been a declaration of war, even though I'm for the TikTok ban for reasons I've talked about in previous videos. Not popular within the alternative media circles, but it is what it is. Any one of those things would have been a declaration of war. The fact that they did all 3 on the same day is quite telling where we're at in this stage in the game. You need to take this prepping stuff seriously. These crazy sons of bitches are not, I repeat, not going to tell you when we are close to the brink. And if what Pepe is saying is true, and I'm not saying it is, we're going to weigh the yays and the nays in terms of things that will confirm or deny this ever happened. But if there's even a kernel of truth to what he's saying, then, my friends, I am very glad that I've been kicking my prepping into overdrive, which is why you might not have seen as much of me as of late, and I'm not doing these hour-long things. I'm going to keep doing it. It's just there's a little lull because I'm too busy actually prepping. Now, here's what he had to say. The real story of the Israeli counter-response from a high-level intel source in Asia, not Russia or China, he says. So Asia, for people not in North America, we call it the Middle East. They also include that. So this could pretty much be anywhere where he got this information. Although the strategic partnership, of course, exchanges at the highest level 24/7. So he's saying that all of these countries are talking amongst themselves. North Korea, China, Russia, Iran, they're all cooperating at a high level, coordinating their attacks against the West, both tactically and strategically. Confirmed, he says, and reconfirmed, because he knew that this is going to be met with a lot of resistance from the open source intelligence community. He says, it will be great to know what Cy Hersh hears from his Beltway sources. Here we go. Israel initially chose to respond with extreme force. An F-35 loaded with a nuclear bomb. Yes, an F-35 loaded with a nuclear bomb was sent east over Jordan. The mission caused a high-altitude detonation over Iran that would provoke a surge in the high-capacity power lines, crippling Iran's electrical grid, as well as disabling all electronic devices, an E.M.P attack. Now, that part is very plausible, okay? It's extremely plausible. Some people are trying to say online that no, the F-35 wouldn't be able to get it up at a high enough altitude. Absolutely it would, because in this case, you would want this to be isolated to a region. Because if you put that thing up too high, you're blacking out the entire Middle East. So indeed, an F-35 would be able to put this bomb at the altitude required to do an E.M.P that would likely just black out the line of sight. That would include in Iran, most of their nuclear facilities, their bases, their major cities, it could be mostly limited. I'm not going to say that that they'd have to position it with pinpoint position to ensure that it didn't affect the surrounding countries. But that is a fair argument right there. If he would have just left it there and he said, well, they decided to call it off at the last minute, I would have believed that, okay? Because we all know what happened the day before with the electronic action messages and the Skymaster exercise, which many people, myself included, viewed as a smokescreen for something bigger that was going on. And recall, 48 hours before this attack, I interviewed Joel Skousen. We didn't release that video until the day after, but it was actually recorded 2 or 3 days before. In that video, Joel Skousen was right. He said that Israel was likely going to do some sort of Pyrrhic attack that would be very low intensity, would send a message, but wasn't escalatory. I proposed to Joel in that video, I said, but what if they utilize an E.M.P weapon over Iran? And he said, as much as he doesn't agree with that, it is very plausible, okay? Because this is the only real weapon they have in their arsenal. They can't really use a nuke. For starters, it would be frowned upon in the international community. But if they framed it as an E-bomb, as they've been trying to, and they said that the residual effect was a nuclear detonation and there wasn't any immediate casualties because it was detonated at such a high enough altitude, minimal fallout, so they could argue that, well, we did this in response, it was the only way we can neutralize the Iranian nuclear program, okay, by using this E.M.P weapon, which wouldn't impact surrounding countries. So very plausible. However, he goes on to say, however, as the Israeli F-35 was leaving Jordanian airspace, it was shot down by the Russian Air Force. Now, this is the part where everybody's like, come on, Pepe, are you on mushrooms? Are you on LSD? What's going on here? Hence, the publicized version of the Israeli counter-response was such a travesty. In the end, all sides decided not to publicize the real news to de-escalate what could well turn into World War III. Now, in terms of the economic and military ties between Iran and China, they are ironclad. Russia is sending Iran Su-35s, I think 24 of them next week. They are sending and helping them build out their own version of the S-400 missile defense system. They have a variety of different military contracts and relationships. China is heavily dependent and will be even more so dependent on Iranian oil in the future. So we know that they have strategic cooperation. That doesn't mean that Russia would be willing, when they haven't intervened at all up until this point, to shoot down an F-35. Number one, that means they'd be able to do it in the first place. They'd be able to identify it and shoot it down. And also that they would actually do it is crazy, considering they're not necessarily adversaries with the Israelis. While they are more allies with the Iranians, their relationship with Israel is very complicated, okay? As much as they want a Palestinian state, as much as they believe that what's happening in Gaza is unjustified, and they've spoken out against the Israelis, and typically Russian media is anti-Israeli in many respects, by and large, they still haven't engaged in any hostilities, and both sides, both the Israelis and the Russians, have shown restraint in partaking in the conflict. They don't turn on their S-400s in Syria to shoot down Israeli planes, so why would they do it in this instance to prevent Iran? However, what I will say about all of this has been criticized by Scott Ritter and other open source intelligence analysts in the community, and rightly so. However, I will say that where there is smoke, there is fire. There is probably some truth to this, with the exception of the Russians shooting it down part. I do think that this will be a move that they could potentially play. Right now, anytime the Israelis aren't in the bunkers waiting for the bombs to come in, they're outside protesting Netanyahu. One of the biggest protests I ever seen in Israel tonight, seen video footage, I should say, was happening tonight against Netanyahu, just days after everybody was cowering in the bunkers because they thought Iran was going to do a wholesale attack. So this incentivizes Netanyahu to do another provocative act that's going to justify more war with surrounding countries, which of course is going to require some level of martial law, be it imposed by the government or be it self-imposed by the people. This is a deadly serious accusation. Now, again, I'm not saying it's true. And in fact, when you really play the tape through here, basically what he's saying is that hence the publicized version of the Israeli counter-response was such a travesty. In the end, all sides decided not to publicize the real news to de-escalate what could well turn into World War III. Look, if the Israelis attempted this once, they're not going to stop there. Now they got the funding, and now what Mike Johnson, this guy who reminds me of Kevin Spacey, like some weird, creepy Kevin Spacey type guy. I'm sure they have receipts on this guy. Anyways, he's basically flipped like a light switch all of a sudden. People are scratching their heads wondering why. He's basically now declared a holy war against Iran. And they've basically now bundled all these things together. So it really is a world war. He referred to them as the axis of evil. Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and the president of Iran, who I always forget his name, okay? Khamenei, I believe it is. Anyways, so this is a sign that if they were willing to commit to this or even consider it once, don't just think because the Russians, if we even believe this, that they shot it down. Maybe it was more of the effect of the Russians are sharing their ISR with the Iranians. They're helping them, and the Iranians maybe had this thing clocked, and they had to turn back. They had to, cancel the mission or something like that. Maybe there was something else going on here. I think, again, though, Pepe Escobar is not the kind of guy. I know, even when you look at him, he's going to seem like the gonzo journalist type. I think he's a cool guy. I'd like to have him on the channel. I'm not, saying anything here, which is, I'm just saying if you just look at him once, he kind of looks like a bit of a wild man. Just kind of if you looked at me, a guy in a t-shirt, you'd like, who the hell is this guy talking, right? But Pepe is somebody I would trust to tell me what's going on. And he's been quoted on Zero Hedge and other alternative media news agencies. I know Zero Hedge is questionable and they have their political biases and all that stuff, but even Zero Hedge is not running with something or someone unless there's some good credibility to it, okay? So now Scott Ritter came out against him, and all I'll say about Ritter, I'm fully aware of his, how would we frame this? Because some people think he was framed for this sexual offense charge, soliciting sex from a minor. Some people said it was because of his work that he did as a nuclear inspector in Iraq and found no weapons of mass destruction and the activism surrounding that. I'm not going to speak to that. I always have to provide that disclaimer because there's always going to be some idiot in the comment section who pipes up and reminds everybody about that whole thing. We all know his history, okay? Nonetheless, Ritter is a very astute intelligence analyst. But what I will say about Ritter and what I will say about Escobar, Ritter came out and challenged Escobar respectfully on this tweet. He basically said that Escobar has written a post where he reports that an Israeli F-35 carrying a nuclear weapon was shot down over Jordan by the Russian fighter. While I respect Pepe as a journalist, his source is wrong. Israel would never take such a precipitous action. Not only would it provide public acknowledgement by Israeli nuclear weapons capability, thereby putting Israel in open violation of existing agreements between it and the U.S., which, who cares? As if, who gives a shit? As if Israel and the U.S. are going to be concerned about violating an agreement between them when they're one of the most heavily funded countries in terms of weapons and just resources next to Ukraine, okay? And we know that they have nuclear weapons. Everybody, it's just an unwritten rule. So it would put also Israel in violation of the 1968 Outer Space Treaty. No, it wouldn't, because as I've already said, they wouldn't have to detonate it in outer space, because you wouldn't want to detonate it in outer space. You detonate it in outer space, you're blocking out a good part of the Middle East if you do that. We're talking about an E.M.P. Okay, the effects, depending on the yield, could be very far-reaching. One of these things could take out the entire eastern seaboard grid. So to say that you'd have to go into outer space, that's, again, that's a bullshit point. That it would be in violation of existing agreements. Nobody gives a fuck, to be brutally honest. So I think these are bullshit arguments from Scott. Moreover, the scenario described make no sense in terms of the characterization of the weapons involved, both in terms of the alleged Russian-Israeli engagement and what Israel would hope happens regarding E.M.P. I agree maybe with that part to an extent. Now, would this wreak havoc on the Iranian grid? Yes, it would bring down like the majority of the Iranian power grid, maybe not the military stuff, because of course Iran, who's been preparing for Israel to use the Samson option, would likely have already hardened its grid for that potentiality. Now, would it cause a lot of damage in the long term? What it wouldn't do is cause an immediate amount of civilian casualties, and the Israelis would be able to say, hey, there's no immediate civilian casualties, it was a high-yield nuke, we just wanted to fry their power grid. But just like sanctions, okay, it will cause a lot of post-acute symptoms. It will cause a lot of death and destruction in the long run, because to rebuild transformers and, a lot of their critical infrastructure would also be fried. A lot of their oil manufacturing and refinement capability would be destroyed, or at least for a long term suspended. This would completely destroy their economy. It would probably throw them into chaos because people would revolt within the government. And this would be a great way to cause a civil war within Iran, would be to first use an E.M.P. So I don't agree with Scott Ritter on this post. And I do think that if you were to put out some information like this, that you would want a gatekeeper to come out. And I am very suspicious that a lot of these intel guys on X in particular are gatekeepers. Because when all that emergency action message stuff was going on a couple nights ago, I never got in on the whole controversy. I wasn't telling people this is the end of the world and this is it. There were some channels out there, not to say they were doing that, but they were saying, hey, this could be, DEFCON 2, DEFCON 1 level stuff. I never said that. I just said, hey, emergency action messages, they happen all the time. They're happening now today in higher amounts. The guys who pay attention to that stuff, I personally can't do it. It's like watching grass grow for me. But the guys who do pay attention say this is significant. But there are exercises, so it might just be an exercise. I did say that those activities and exercises, not only is every war from here on in going to start with an exercise, but they can also be a smoke screen. They can create more confusion and just put more signals up in the air to create confusion amongst our adversaries, so that if you did want to do an attack, which, surprise, happened the day after, okay, it would just create a lot of misdirection and confusion around it. So I was not surprised. But there was a lot of people on that day shooting down anybody who tried to relate this to any real world event, almost just coming out like, I don't know, just like sentinels, just like whenever they catch wind that, and that's how you almost know that something big is coming, because every time these guys start opening their mouths and start making a big stink because somebody is suspecting that we might actually be not only at the beginning of World War III, but it might be going hot, these guys jump in like Normalcy Norman and tell you it's all just an exercise, don't worry about it, go back to watching fucking TV. Now, I'm sure that the intelligence agencies of the world have people out there in social media to downplay these threats, to manage public panic, okay? And look, we as influencers run the risk of yelling fire in a crowded theater. We don't want to be Orson Welles end of the world type stuff, because people can end up doing really dumb shit if they think that the world is ending and the bombs are inbound. And that's something I've never, ever done. I've never said that shit could go down in the next hour or it's going down right now. That is crossing a line. Okay, I will always tell you if my concerns are running high, if I think that we're getting very close, but never have I come out and said it's happening right now. But one of these days, it will be happening right now. And when that happens, you are going to have these people coming out of the woodwork, the gatekeepers, to tell everybody that no, these guys are full of shit, and they have large followings of people. Most of them are former military, and I'm not even saying they're all on the take. Lots of them are just useful idiots. To be brutally honest, they've been so indoctrinated, and they only see things from their own like little purview of their designated rank in the hierarchy, what the highest rank that they've had. And the ones who are up high at the general level, well, they're all bought out and trying to make a name for themselves, acting as like pundits, like the Ben Hodges of the world, and just, you know, telling people complete and utter bullshit about the state of the current conflict. So just be very careful, because this is what we're up against. Not only are we up against a media that is going to be completely deceitful when the time comes and not going to tell us that shit's going to hit the fan. They will not tell you when it's going to hit the fan. I am 100% sure of that. We will be the last to know. But in addition to that, they have this army of people out there, maybe some are paid, maybe some are not, to downplay these things. Now, was Pepe telling the truth here, and did Scott come up? Because I'm always wondering, you know, if Scott's going and taking trips to Russia, visiting Kadyrov, doing all these things that you know, would immediately bring heat on anybody, especially a former intelligence operative who was sent to jail for a sex crime, okay? If people are of the belief that he was just framed for that, then why couldn't they do it again for what he's doing now? Now, arguably, maybe he had dirt on people back then. He had dirt on people, and he could have brought some individuals down. And we know that when individuals in these rings are getting ready to go down, they will do anything. They'll put somebody in jail, they'll rattle their cage, they'll do whatever it takes for them to stay out of jail. So it could just be that Ritter's past court case was ado with the fact that he had too much insider knowledge on specific people, and that now his knowledge is more in the culture war, so to speak. So they're kind of like, well, you know, he's going against the status quo narrative, but he doesn't really have any specific dirt on anybody. Nonetheless, I mean, you would think that if he was saying something that really did run, you know, counter to what's going on right now in Washington, and that he's going against the long game, that they would take him out again, just like they did before. So something weird is going on here, that he immediately comes out and challenges Escobar, which I don't blame him, because this is exactly what I would have expected Scott to say. Because I agree with, for the most part, I agree with the sentiment. I don't agree with the specifics of what Scott says, because it makes no sense. And, you know, I've taken issue with a lot of what Ritter has said, but I think I've shown here that it doesn't have to be detonated in outer space, and he should know that, unless he's just thinking of it from a high altitude E.M.P. But if you detonate it high enough over Iran, okay, not at the only reason why you go high altitude is so you can get a massive area affected. That's why you would do it in space, but you don't have to. You can do it at a high altitude, and the E.M.P. effect would still be very broad and would fry, you know, things within 1,000-mile radius. So, or diameter, I should say, because Iran is what, 1,000 miles-ish wide. So, anyways, crazy, crazy shit, man. Crazy shit going down all around. The aid bill has passed. The TikTok bill has passed. ByteDance now is going to have to sell, and this is going to start a trade war with the Chinese. The Ukrainian weapons are going to be there probably within a week, okay? Now that they've gotten approval for this, and now that they're going to turn on the machines again. And it's funny, because I'm not sure if you guys heard, I think Full Spectrum Survival was talking about it, but there's been acts of sabotage happening across numerous weapons manufacturing facilities where they manufacture these 155 millimeter shells. Okay, we have a string of accidents in defense facilities in the US and the UK that have happened recently. And also in Germany, they arrested a couple Russian nationals who were taken into custody because they were getting ready to bomb industrial and military sites. So these acts of sabotage are happening. A fire broke out at a military plant in Scranton, Pennsylvania on April 15th, as well as an explosion that occurred at a manufacturing plant at BAE Systems, the UK's largest defense contractor. On April 17th, both facilities have been producing supplies for Kiev's forces in the war. So this is something that is ongoing. There is a massive war, and now this is going to allow them to rearm. What the problem is, Ukraine just did another attack deep into Russia, 50 drones. So now there's been no expectation, as far as I can tell, on the part of Ukraine to start to restrain themselves in terms of attacking Russia's critical infrastructure that the United States took issue with because it was causing the price of oil to tick up. And of course, what's going on in Iran. They are still attacking those, and they're churning out these drones in large numbers. Now they're getting this massive infusion of cash, not only from the United States, but also from Europe. In addition to that, on the same day that the U.S. starts a trade war with the Chinese over the TikTok bill, they're going to give another $8 billion to Taiwan. Maybe this is why all of those chip stocks are starting to tank, and they've been tanking for about a month now. And I don't think it's the economy. Tesla has been dropping too, I guess you could say. The NASDAQ a little bit is kind of trading sideways, but those chip stocks are tanking, and they really shouldn't be unless they were worried that those chip manufacturing facilities were going to be in the crosshairs of a major war, or that the Chinese were going to commandeer them, or that the Taiwanese were going to switch sides. Now they have $8 billion. I cannot understand for the life of me how the Taiwanese, seeing what has happened in Ukraine up until this point, seeing what has happened in Israel, how they can believe that the U.S. is going to be able to come to their aid, especially when you have North Korea, when you have the Chinese peppered all throughout that region. And I mean, this is just insane, insane, insane. So they're now about to open this massive front in the east, in Israel, in Ukraine. All the while, we're in a perpetual state of debt. Okay, the inflation rate keeps going higher and higher. And the only solution they have is the Repo Act bill, which is going to be the first of many seizures of Russian assets to transfer to Ukraine. This is going to kill the US dollar as a global reserve currency. The US is shooting itself in the foot. This is the classic snake eating its tail at the end of an era. And this is why gold is going up, because everybody sees the writing on the wall. This is the end. They're now going for broke. You cannot trust any of these politicians, any of these leaders, Trump or any of them. They're all going to fall in line. Remember, Trump fell in line as well. People say, well, he's, I mean, whatever, man. It's just demagogy or whatever you want to call it. Like, he's not going to change a thing. You got to prep for yourself. Just like Skousen says, if people are not scared, they don't prepare. If everybody thinks everything's fine and they think, oh, Trump's coming back and he's going to change things. No, he's not. We are so fucked on so many levels. Things I don't even talk about anymore, like the climate stuff, which is getting crazier and crazier by the day. The shit that happened in Dubai the other day with the floods is just like, what was that one beach, that popular beach that got completely destroyed recently, and we all forgot about it? I mean, the Hawaii thing, just one thing after another. That is but one. We have the economy, we have the climate chaos, and we have the war. And then we have the civil war. I think the Israelis' only potential card here, and the only way that Netanyahu is going to guarantee that he can stay in power and keep these people locked down, is if he can start a war, a major war, either with Hezbollah or Iran. I think the only way they're going to have any hope in hell of winning that war is if they're able to cause some sort of civil unrest in Iran. Now, they've tried this before, and every time they try it, Iran just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. They reach a new plateau of control. The only way they can do it, if they turn the lights out and they send in some saboteurs and they can get in some warplanes, I think that's what they would do. I think that Pepe Escobar's theory is not very far-fetched, because this is how they would start it. Now, the only reason why they wouldn't do that is if they knew that the Iranians didn't have nukes yet. If they believe that the Iranians have nukes, they might call it off. But the Iranians are now talking about it in the last 48 hours, contemplating changing their policy to make some halal nuclear weapons, because, of course, it goes against the Muslim philosophy to use nuclear weapons because of the contamination to the environment or something like that. I'm sure they could rationalize, why they would be able to do it without contaminating or minimal contamination, or in defense of their faith or whatever the case, but they're now changing their nuclear doctrine or in the process of doing so. So I don't believe Ritter's reasoning one bit. But that's not to say I agree with Escobar either. These are very fantastical claims that we need more evidence for before just jumping to that conclusion. But we know that something went on that night. Now, the official, unofficial, de facto narrative is that Israel took out the radars of these facilities basically as a message to the Iranians. Look, we're going to put up some drones, make it look like we're a bunch of idiots, but at the same time, we're going to take out your radars, and then you're going to know that we can take out your radars from your missile defense, which means we can take out your missile defense, which means we can take out your facilities eventually. That's what they're basically telegraphing. At least that's what the Israelis want anybody who's paying attention to believe. They know the masses don't give a shit because they're just trying to work 10 jobs just to get by. Another front is opening in Odessa, this time in the Russians' favor. Pro-Russian Ukrainian partisans have entered the fight. So you know the guys, the neo-Nazi guys who are on the border going into Belgorod, these small-scale Pyrrhic incursions into Russia and basically just getting pushed out and shot up. Now the same thing is going to happen in Odessa. There's a resistance element forming there because, of course, there is a large Russian population there. They say, "We are the Ukrainians living in the hero city of Odessa. Today we announce that the Third Front has formed and is ready to fight for our independence. We intend to avenge the murder of the House of Trade Unions for 10 years of outrage and oppression. We intend to kill your commanders and blow up your headquarters. We intend to cleanse our glorious hero city of the Zelensky dogs," they claim. Things are heating up. Now, in response to all of this Iranian stuff, the U.S. has thrown some chips into the pot. They've said they have a new Wunderwaffen. The U.S. forces have secretly deployed a missile. Okay, so this is already deployed, they claim, that can literally fry electronic components in Iranian nuclear sites using high-powered microwaves. The missile, known as a Counter-Electronics High-Powered Microwave Advanced Missile Project, CHAMP, was first tested in 2012 and is jointly developed by Boeing's Phantom Works for the U.S. Air Force Research Laboratory. The missile is understood to have been in operation since 2019. Besides underground bunkers and command centers, I'm not sure how deep those waves could penetrate, HPM can quickly disable fighter planes, tanks, ships, missile systems, according to officials. So I'll have to look more into this. I'm assuming it works similar to an E.M.P, I suppose. But basically, they're probably doing this for some sort of deterrence purposes, or this is going to be cover for when they do detonate the E.M.P, softening people to the idea. The reason why I'm not in front of the screen today, I'm kind of getting my news on the fly. I've been prepping my ass off. That's what I've been doing. But we're still releasing a lot of blue strip content. You might not see it because everybody just wants to hear the bad news. I understand information is power, but you gotta get the gear while you can. Jace Medical, we just did a thing with them. Not only now do they have chronic meds and antibiotics, which you need to get because once the government catches wind of what Jace is doing, remember the government just banned in last June fish antibiotics, okay? I'm not going to get into that, but they banned them because people were, of course, using them. Preppers were using them, claiming that they were made in the same factory. I'm not going to comment on that. Dr. Bones and Nurse Amy, friends of the channel, have a lot to say about it, though. Anyways, Jace, they now have a kids pack, okay? And I've been building out my pharmacy with Jace, so I got all kinds of antibiotics, EpiPens, topical anesthetics, things of that nature, things that require a prescription. But their kids pack is absolutely essential. If you have kids, it comes with some kids anti-nausea agents like ondansetron. It comes with some amoxicillin, a chewable version for kids. Same dosage, but chewable, because of course kids have a hard time swallowing. So all the medications have to be chewable. It comes with a, you can get all sorts of add-ons like junior EpiPens, things that you would have to go into the doctor and have a very uncomfortable conversation. Hey, I'm just prepping for SHTF, and usually, I don't know how it is in the States, you go in for a consult, you're going in for one issue, one ailment. With Jace, you can go and just load up you talk to a physician, okay? It's totally legit, certified physicians. You place your order, and you could do boom, 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 all the different types of things that you need. You get it cleared, you have a consult with a doctor, so you're paying slightly more for the medications. However, you're getting this whole smorgasbord of meds that, of course, you would only self-administer under the advice of a physician. Of course, we know if shit hits the fan, that's not going to be a luxury for half the people, and this is only for purposes of emergency. Always consult with your doctor before taking any medications. I must make that abundantly clear. However, the whole philosophy of Jace is that there may not be help coming someday. The supply chain is very fragile. We get most of our medications from China and India. If those supply chains break down, now that they're going to go to war with Taiwan, that Taiwan Strait is where, I can't remember how much trade passes through there, but it's like 50% of global trade, okay, passes through there. That gets shut down. Those ships either have to reroute or they have to just not sail at all. And of course, a lot of our medications wouldn't be coming from China if we were at war with them. So what this means is that your medications that you need, whether you think you need them or not, okay, whether you have kids or not, most of my viewers, I assume you have kids, you have grandkids, you need to go and pick up a Jace Kids Pack, okay? I don't even know if you have to have kids to get one. I don't think you do, to be honest, okay? But just go and get one of these. Get this medication while you can. This is going to be worth more than gold. The life extension program conducted by the US military, because they had billions of dollars of medication that they needed to dispose of. They did tests on all of it, the potency after many years, in some cases 20 years, some medications, certain antibiotics still retained enough potency to be effective, okay? So even though these medications have expiration dates, the shelf life extension program shows us that, look, when the shit hits the fan, you find medication that's 5 years old, I'm not saying use it. I'm just saying remember the shelf life extension program. We got to use our common sense, because this stuff, man, you get a cut, you're going to be out there doing stuff in the field, you get shot, all sorts of, antibiotics are number one. You need to get their antibiotics. That is probably one of the first things of the more extravagant preparedness items that you can get is antibiotics. I would probably even say before a gas mask, get the antibiotics. Because if you can't get that and you get sliced up or something happens and we got a grid down scenario unfolding, or maybe not even a grid down, maybe there's just a shortage, okay, and you can't get those meds fast enough and that frickin' infection is spreading through your arm or something. You need to get that help fast, okay? So go and capitalize on the Jace Medical. I'll post a link in the description below. Even if you don't have kids, this is going to be a barter item like no other. I can't remember, was it Leave the World Behind, where they make a deal with the guy for the medications at the end? Now, honestly, if somebody's dying and you have medication, don't be an asshole, give them some medication. So long as, you're taken care of and you're not worried that they're a threat to your family, give them the damn medication. But it can also be used as a barterable item in addition to that. So, of course, it's a prescription medication, so I don't know about the legalities around that. I've probably said way too much, and before you know it, the government's coming for that, so you better get it before they find out that it's even a service, because you know how these government people are. They're completely oblivious until they're not, and then they make it their full-time job to try to deprive us of our rights and privileges, as Trudeau likes to call them here. Anyways, guys, I got to get rocking and rolling, but stay tuned. We got a lot of great content coming your way as we take this prepping thing up to the macro level. Take care.